Welcome to the 2 Cents We See Scary Movies podcast, where we give our completely unfiltered, probably unnecessary, but definitely entertaining opinions on horror movies. I'm Talon, and if Dan and I were a famous YouTube prank couple, I'd be the one constantly apologizing in the comment section while Dan is out here orchestrating the kind of pranks that require a lawyer on retainer. 1 minute it's harmless jump scares, next thing you know, we're trending under #canceled. But lucky for us, we just watch horror movies instead of starring in them. So let's get into it. This week, we're still deep in our month of pranks, and Dan picked a movie that fits the theme a little too well, Making Monsters. It's about a YouTube couple who make a career out of elaborate pranks only to find themselves in a situation where the prank is on them. And this time, the punchline is murder. Since Dan picked the movie, he's leading the episode, which means I get to sit back, throw in my 2 cents, and most likely scream, "I told you so," at the screen while these characters make all the worst possible decisions ever. Let's get into it.
All right, so the movie is called Making Monsters. You can find it on Tubi. It's 2019, runtime 95 minutes, directed by Justin Harding, also written by Justin Harding, and co-directed by Rob Brunner. IMDb rating is 5.5 out of 762 reviews. It stars Tim Loden as Chris, Alana Elmer as Allison, Jonathan Craig as David, and Jarrett Siddell as David's ghost. There's a couple other people in here that have active roles, but IMDb, I guess, didn't really feel like crediting them. So it only shows 4 people.
That's interesting. Even though he didn't have a huge role, Jesse had a speaking role. And then there's, a significant scene with him near the end. So that's weird.
Right. So, yeah, we'll just get right into the whole thing. So the first scene, it opens with a bloody man running in through a field. Then you find that there's a person behind him chasing with an ATV a considerable distance away. The guy gets off of his ATV and ends up shooting a gentleman in the side with a high-powered rifle. He's able to get up, and he starts running a little further because he ends up getting shot in the leg. The second shot hits him on the opposite side of the hip. The guy who's doing the shooting, it looks like he's got some sort of wooden mask, so you can't see who he is. So the masked guy starts walking towards him, and he starts screaming because he wants to live, of course, and the guy on the ground grabs the gun. The masked guy starts mocking him. He's like, "Oh, don't kill me, I want to live." He ends up pulling out a machete and starts hacking away at him. And then the next scene, you see him getting on the ATV, and the naked man is tied to a rope on the ATV. It's an overhead shot, so you see the guy's full frame, dong and all. Then you see his arm chopped off on the side. They start driving away. I know you have to suspend a little bit of reality for movies and such, but the body you can definitely tell was like made out of foam or something because the arms were too stiff when they were driving away. Then it cuts to a wedding store. It shows a young woman, which is later to be known as Allie, or Allison, goes by Allie through the movie. She's shopping for wedding dresses. She's got a friend there with her. The saleswoman is, they're talking about the dress that she's wearing, and everybody thinks it's all great and stuff. And the salesperson goes over to get another dress and starts talking about the history of the dress. It's like a 1943 dress, and is suggesting that she was going to look really good in it, and she should try it out. Allison, isn't quite too keen on the idea of the dress, but she ends up trying it on anyway. And when she has it on, she's saying that the person who it was designed for was a famous opera singer of the time, and she ended up dying the day before her wedding, so the dress was never worn. Now, she's saying that as Allison is wearing the dress.
I thought it was funny when she was all like, she drowned in her bathtub the night before her wedding, so it's never been worn. It's brand new. From 1943. It's like, okay.
And it just happens to be in a wedding store. Allison ends up getting a closer look at the mirror, and then all of a sudden someone jumps out and scares her. He's got a mask on, and he's got a wedding dress, and you can tell it's a guy because, he's got hairy chest, hairy back, and so, it's...
What are you trying to say? I have a hairy chest and a hairy back.
Well, it's a good thing you shave. So he jumps out and scares her. He takes off the mask and he's like, "Hey, ha ha ha, this is like the best trick that we've ever pulled." which I don't understand that because my 7-year-old can pull better tricks than that. He's getting all excited about it, pumping up his YouTube channel, or they don't say YouTube, but whatever platform that he's supposedly using. He's talking to his fans and he's pointing out the cameras and talking about how it's the best prank ever and that they're going to just keep going bigger and bigger. And then it cuts into a montage of him on a talk show, which I think that's one thing I have a hard time with some of these influencer movies. They make them seem like they're so much bigger than they actually are. There's very few influencers that have that kind of sway. You don't see influencers going on like Leno or, well, wow, I'm dating myself, Jimmy Fallon or anything like that.
He was doing some kind of weird TED Talk thing. I'm like, was he doing a TED Talk on his pranking YouTube channel?
Right, and he's like all dressed up and all serious and talking about, doing what he loves and how successful he is.
Right.
But anyway, he's talking about the love of his life being Allison and that he learned a long time ago that he should do what he loves, and he built his entire channel around her, and that's where all his success comes from, and without her, he wouldn't be where he is today.
Yeah, I also found it interesting that she was the person that got pranked in every one of his videos. It's like, wouldn't they get, I don't know, first of all, I would think that would get boring after a while for people who are watching. But how is she not expecting it all the time? To have the same person get pranked over and over and over again for years, I would think that just get boring.
Yeah, I've seen some of those prank videos where it's the same couple over and over again, and after a while, I'm just like, yeah, I'm done. I don't care about this anymore. Oh, yeah, also in the TED Talk, he mentions that her family is a bunch of mediums. They can talk to dead people and things like that. And I'm going to be honest, like when I first sat down and watched this movie, there were some parts that made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever because they were awkwardly put into the movie. When I finished, I'm like, why did he mention that? That didn't really have anything to do with the movie. When I was taking notes is when I figured out, what that whole thing was. And we'll get into that later.
I wonder if it's the same thing that I'm thinking of, because there was something that I didn't understand the first time I watched it. And the second time I watched it, I was like, hold on. And then when it got to the end, I was like, okay, I totally missed that the first time.
Yeah, it probably is.
I just want to say something about the very beginning of the movie. I really liked the opening scene because I liked that they started right away with that just boom, right off the bat.
Yep, I'd agree.
You had something going on. I do this all the time, but I found myself yelling at the screen, zigzag, zigzag, which I do. Whenever I see a movie or a TV show where somebody's like in this one, the guy's running and you can see through the sight that the bad guy had because the guy's running in a straight line. So I'm like, zigzag, zigzag. It's just like, I think I told you, what was that movie? I can never remember the name of this movie. I always want to call it The End of the World, but the one with Julia Roberts that came out this past year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I forget the name,
never
but
say
yes,
it right. There's that scene where the guy who owns the house that they're staying in is out at the beach and he notices all this stuff on the beach. And then there's a plane in the distance that's coming in that's going to crash on the beach. He sees it and he's like, oh shit, and starts running. And as he's running, I'm like, zigzag, zigzag. I do it every time. So anyway,
that's great.
But yeah, I did like the beginning and how they started off right away. And then, of course, there's the whole zigzagging. But go ahead.
It was just awkward starting off that way, and then they show like a wedding dress scene. That was a little weird, but
right.
But I guess you got to start the love story somewhere.
Right.
So then after the title screen, there's a really tight shot of Allison's face, and then it switches over to a doctor, and you're hearing what the doctor is saying through her perspective. And at first, she's not really grasping what he's saying because the words are kind of soft and quiet, and you really can't hear much. And then it starts clearing up, and the fertility doctor, you end up figuring out that's who he is talking about what it's going to take to have a successful pregnancy, and he's talking about having no stress and leading a calm life. And I don't know if it was like specific to her, but I know many women who were pregnant and has had some stress and they were still able to carry the baby. The way he made it sound was any stress, she would lose the kid.
There's something else about this later on that I have a comment on when they get to the house.
Okay. At that point, Chris jumps into the scene and he's like, "Oh, Doc, you bet you don't have like a really great selection in there." And he hands him a cup of his goo. The doctor looks at it like, "Is that it?" And Chris is like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you sure you didn't spill any?" He's like, "Yeah, that's all that came out." And the doctor's like, "Oh, I'm just messing with you." They
He's got his
have
own
a
prank show.
right. You have a little bit of a laugh, and the next scene, they're coming out of the office, and Chris is like, "Oh my God, $30,000! I'm not paying for that. That's outrageous." And she corrects him, saying, "Well, 28,000." And
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, big difference." Which I probably would have had the same response on that one. Because I mean, when you're talking 30K, 2,000 isn't going to make that much of a difference. As they're walking out, they bump into a friend named Jesse, and they're introducing each other, talking to each other. They're shooting the shit, saying, "Hey, you should come by." So they agree to go see him at his church with his husband.
Yeah, I felt like this was a very forced scene. I guess they have to put something in there so that this guy that's his friend from years ago suddenly shows up at the same time. It just seemed really forced. But I think also there's a lot of things they put in here to make you think maybe it's going this way, or maybe it's going that way, or maybe this is who's doing this. So, because I will say during the movie, I did question, I wonder if this is what's actually happening, or they're probably doing this, blah, blah, blah. And, we'll talk more about that later on when things come along. So I thought maybe they just did that way. So, because it did feel so out of nowhere. Like, what? And forced almost, which makes you think, well, maybe this was planned or, whatever.
Well, I mean, I think the movie had a lot of ideas that they were trying to work out. Again, it goes back to June 9th, where, I had said that, they just threw some spaghetti on the wall and they took everything that stuck.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing with this. Like, they had a lot of ideas that weren't widely explored and were just kind of like thrown in there, almost feeling last minute. And this is one of those scenes that was just like, I know that they were trying to set something up, but it was just like a really awkward way of doing it.
Yeah.
So they agree and they go on their merry way. And the next scene is Chris watching his own videos, probably editing them. Allie starts having a conversation with him about how she doesn't want any more stress and that they're going to have to figure something out because she no longer wants to be pranked, because she wants to have a baby. Right. This pisses Chris off. He gets like really passive aggressive about it, saying, "Oh, maybe I should just cancel everything and just stop doing this because, hey, we'll just tank the channel. Let's do that." And then he looks at his followers, because I guess while he was watching his own videos, he was also recording himself.
I felt like it was a live stream.
And that's another thing. Like, who would watch? I certainly wouldn't. Who would watch someone watching their own videos?
He was watching his own videos. I just feel like he was live streaming and talking to people. But it was weird because he kept kind of saying the same thing over and over.
After that, they're driving in the country and Allie's discussing all the meds that she has to take. She's talking about how she doesn't know how to administer a shot. And he's like, "Oh, you brought everything? Like, why did you bring that?" Talking about...
That's what I asked.
Yeah. "Oh, I agree." They're kind of talking about it. It's like, "Well, do you know how to stick someone with a needle?" And he's like, "Well, I know how to stick someone with something." He makes a medication scenario sexual, which I would expect, because I can't say that I wouldn't do something like that, because everything in my head turns that way anyway.
I also questioned, why is she bringing all this shit with her on this weekend that they're just going to go, hang out at their friend's house? Like, why is she bringing all of her IVF stuff with her?
Right.
Especially since they're not starting until the next week to do the IVF. But of course, it does set up for something later. But still, like, what?
They don't even know how long they're going to be there, because it was never discussed how long that they would be there for. He didn't say the weekend, you'll be there for a week, overnight. They never stated that. So she's bringing all her medications without knowing how long they're going to be there for.
Right. I mean, I initially thought it was just going to be like an overnight thing, or maybe just a weekend thing. Like, what if it were just an overnight thing? If it were just overnight, which is what my assumption was originally, why would you take all that with you?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, when I pack for a week, I have maybe 3 bags. And I'm talking about the Walmart canvas bags.
Right.
I'm a light packer. I don't pack shit.
Yeah, neither do I. Definitely wouldn't take all my medications for my IVF that I'm not starting until next week.
Right, exactly. So as they're driving, she suggests like maybe they could have the wedding at the church that they're going to, which I thought was kind of odd because she doesn't even know what it looks like. She doesn't know the people
Right.
or anything like that. And that's automatically like, hey, let's do it there.
Yeah.
And Chris was hesitant at first, but he's like, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. They reiterate that they both want a baby. They finally get to the church and they seem surprised that it's a church. When they get out of the car, it's like, oh, it's a church. They told you it was a church. And then David comes out and meets them, which is Jesse's husband. They go inside the church and they're talking about how they do like it. David is in awe of the fact that, he's got a couple celebrities in the house.
Right.
Of course, meeting Chris and Allie. He states that Jesse is delayed, so he's not going to be there till morning. As they're walking through the living room, Allie is noticing that Jesse sculpts horror masks or horror busts, people's heads and like gory stuff. Chris ends up scaring the crap out of her again. So much for not pranking anybody. As they're going through the living room, David comes up to his section. He's talking about how he likes to go metal detecting and like the different treasures that he finds.
Right. He's a metal detectorist.
Yes, a metal detectorist. Chris asks him how much money he makes, and he's like, well, I don't really make a lot, but I get paid in treasure. Chris kind of mocks this a little bit, and, David's a little put off by it, which is understandable. It's something that he loves, and, he's being made fun of for it. And he shows them, like, was it a penny that he found?
Yeah.
And he gives the history of the
Indian
penny. Yeah. And Allie is like kind of like intrigued by it, like, oh, that was here for like 100 years. And Chris is just kind of blowing it off a little bit. As they're going through more of the tour, David shows them the backyard and gives the history of the backyard, stating that it's a graveyard, but all the stones were disintegrated and they were pulled out, but all the bodies are still there. And so that kind of creeps Allison out a little bit. Chris isn't completely fazed by it, but again, he's just kind of like more in a mocking sort of mood. And so now Allie's afraid of the place. So I think wedding plans there are off. It doesn't expressly say that, but I'm pretty sure the wedding plans are off there. And so she starts talking to Chris about how she feels like she was lied to because Chris had told her that Jesse was a makeup artist, and she's upset that the fact that she wasn't told that it was basically monster makeup, which I don't see what the big deal is with it, because it doesn't really say anything previous that she's got like an aversion to it or that she's scared of it or anything like that. It's just kind of like a random, like, I wish you would have told me because this bothers me.
Yeah, I think that was funny too, because I was like, is she terrified of monsters? Or maybe it just harkens back to him always wearing masks and stuff and scaring her, and maybe she's got PTSD.
True. No, that's very true. Again, it's like one of those things where, you would think that they would kind of discuss that a little bit. And so they're also kind of talking a little smack about David a little bit. And then all of a sudden you hear David talking and they're like, hey, you're trying to figure out where he is. And he's like down here and he's in the floor vent and he can look up and you can see between floors. And he's like, yeah, I can hear everything. And you may want to cover up the vent if you want more privacy. So David is cooking dinner while he's on the phone, and that's when he finds out Jesse isn't going to be there. So it's a little premature on the timeline of Jesse. That's when he finds out that Jesse's not coming, is at dinner time, that he missed his flight, and he should be there in the morning. They make dinner, and David lets them know it's mussels from Brussels. Chris is kind of put off because he says that he's allergic. I forget the word that he used.
Bivalves.
Yeah, okay. David is saying, well, it's mussels because he's not aware of the word. Chris explains it to him, and David now is put off because Chris is allergic. He's like, well, what can you eat? He's like, well, French fries. He's like, well, I can give you frites. And he just like takes a handful of French fries and just throws it on his plate. Allie is talking about how much she likes the mussels because she is never able to have them. And so she's enjoying the meal and she thinks it's fantastic and great. At this point, you can really tell that there's some tension between Chris and David. It's just like kind of like creasing. Like they're not going at each other, but they're being passive aggressive towards each other. All the while, Allie is having an orgasm over these mussels.
Yeah, she really was.
And so
there's also some weird, not tension per se, but so during that scene, especially when David was talking to Christopher and Christopher was talking about, yeah, how great the show is. He's talking about, and he's really talking it up. And she's over there rolling her eyes and flitting her hands around. Like she was kind of being flippant about the show, which has, as much as she might dislike the show, it's made them a lot of money apparently, but you could tell she had a lot of disdain for the show because he was talking about it, and so was David. David loved it. He was talking about how he's watched every episode, and she's just kind of rolling her eyes and not very thrilled with it.
Yeah. And when they started talking about the money aspect, David asks him, "Oh, do you make a lot of money?" He's like, "Yeah, considerably." And she looks at David's like, "No." At that point, they're continuing their dinner talk, and Chris starts talking about his followers because David's like, "How do you get so many people? How do you get people to follow you and stuff?" And Chris just starts talking about people like watching other people going through traumatic events. They like the violence. They like people being scared and the terror and the trauma. And at that point, Chris is pushing Allie to talk about her family and the fact that they're mediums. David starts asking, can they talk to the dead and things like that? She's not comfortable talking about it because she just really wasn't prepared. Allie again mentions the stress on the baby and no longer pranking and stuff like that. And Chris is still kind of like on the idea of pushing her to do it. So it kind of really makes you wonder, because during his little TED talk, he was talking about how she's the love of his life and how he built his entire business around her, and she doesn't want to do it anymore. And you would think, as a person who is madly in love with this person, would say, hey, let's try to figure this out then, and not continuously pressure her into continuing when she's saying no. So really makes you think about how loving he really is, or does he just love her because he's made her money? At that point, Allie's talking about the wine and how reports suggest that it lowers your inhibitions and it makes your partner want to sleep with you and all this other stuff. Chris wasn't quite getting it. Then Allie is just like, I want to fuck. And he's like, okay. But so now the next scene, it's not them fucking, it's them doing karaoke rap. And it's not that I was necessarily expecting a sex scene, but I would think that when someone says, hey, I want to have sex, that would kind of be the next scene, not badly rapped karaoke. And
although I did like her dick o'clock.
Yes. So they're drinking heavily. David ends up making a shot out of mushrooms. I'm assuming the hallucinogenic type. They drink it and no one likes it. They're all disgusted by it. They're basically like, why the hell did I drink this? They continued partying and at this point doing some other drugs. She's worried about things that are going to happen while trying to get pregnant, but here she is partying it up like it's 1999.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? This woman's talking nonstop about wanting to have a baby and she can't be stressed. She can't be stressed. She can't be stressed. But she's drinking alcohol. They're smoking some kind of like this, a small, like a cigarello or like a small cigar, and doing mushroom hallucinogenic shots. I was like, yeah, sure. This makes perfect sense.
Right.
Don't stress me out, but give me all the drugs, liquor, all the alcohol possible, whatever. That makes total sense.
Yeah. At that point, they're all drugged up and everything, and they start going to their respective bedrooms. And Allie walks into her bedroom and she's staring into a dark corner of the room, and she's thinking that it's Chris at this time. And he ends up coming up behind her and scares her. And this time accidentally, like he actually didn't mean to scare her this time.
Yeah.
And she is swearing that she sees somebody in the corner, or that she saw somebody in the corner, and he doesn't see it. Right. And she's upset that she's seeing things. And at this point, you could probably attribute it to some hallucinations from the mushrooms. So at that point, she's upset and crying. Chris finally says, you know what? We'll put the pranking aside and we'll just have the baby. I'll figure something else up. We'll do something bigger and better. She's all excited and happy about it. They're being all lovey-dovey and talking about their love. All the while, David is passed out on the couch. This is when the sex scene starts. The thing that I found weird about that is the scary music that they were playing. Granted, it's a horror movie, but I've never seen a horror movie play scary music over a sex scene unless there's like Jason or Freddy or somebody coming.
Yeah.
Right. But in this instance, it was just the sex scene. It made no sense for the music. Sometimes self-made movies just don't work. they end up going to bed after having sexy time. Like the next scene is Allison waking up, and when she's getting out of bed, it's almost like she got hit by a truck. Like the way she's moving, it's like she's never walked before. She's waking up out of a coma. She ends up going to the bathroom to take a bath.
Yeah, out of nowhere.
And she's laying in the tub watching the water drip. The door creaks open. She looks over to see who it is, and Allison sees Allison walking through the door. Allison in the bathtub is, of course, completely buck naked, and Allison in the doorway is completely dressed head to toe. And she's walking fine. Like, she's not walking like, she was hit by anything. Obviously, bathtub Allison is scared right now.
She's terrified. Yeah.
Yes. It shows Allison in the doorway also looking in fear. So she goes back into the bathroom. Allie in the bathtub is still there, but this time she kind of looks like Julia from Hellraiser 2 when she has no skin.
Right. It's the creepy creature she thought she saw in that room before. The right. When she was by herself before Christopher came, there was like this little thing hiding behind a desk, and it's that same creature. Yeah.
Yeah. The creature ends up screaming at her, and doorway Allie runs out. And then she again peeks around the corner. Skinless Allie is no longer there, and she walks in and touches the bathtub and realizes that there was water, like there was like droplets of water in there. So as if someone actually did use it. Then she runs out to wake up Chris. For some reason, they show that she's still freaked out by the sculptures that are around the house. So she's not quite to Chris yet, and another figure shows up in the living room and stops her dead in her tracks and lifts her up telekinetically and kind of like...
the same creature.
Is it the same creature? I thought it was a different one.
No, it's the same creature. It's just that one creature in the whole movie. Yeah.
Okay, well, later it showed... I guess it was because, like, the later version, it had skin, and so I thought...
When we talk about... I don't know if that thing that we were talking about in the beginning that we both were like, we didn't catch on to the first time around. I don't know if it's the same thing or not, but yeah, I guess we can talk about this creature later.
Yeah.
Because I have things about this creature later.
Right. The creature ends up lifting her up and brings her outside and shows her the cellar stairs outside. At this point, Chris wakes up and he's cold. It's freezing cold. He sees that the electricity is not working because he kind of flips different switches and realizes that's not there. He's yelling out to Allison and David, and neither one of them are responding to him. Chris ends up looking outside, and Allison is out there completely naked in a circle of rocks. She's got like
that's the fire pit that's in the
What was it, the fire pit? Okay. And so she's in there. There's snow on the ground, where when they first showed up, there was no snow whatsoever, which is fine because you do find out later that it's April. So that's a very good possibility that there was no snow one day. Yeah. At first, I thought that was a continuity error, but then when I realized that it was April, that's like, okay, that makes sense. So there's a few things in here that I found as continuity errors, but then I realized after it made sense, you needed to have like all the little bits of information to make sure that it worked. So Allie is just kind of like frozen in fear, just kind of stuck where she's at. Chris wraps her in a blanket and brings her inside. When he brings her inside, they end up doing like a long outside shot of the church, giving the feeling of being watched. At least that's how I took it. I mean, it didn't really like have any breathing or anything like that, but it just kind of gave that feel.
Yeah, I know exactly the part you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I thought that too.
And Chris is trying to talk to Allie, but she's frozen scared, both literally and figuratively, because it didn't say what the temperature was outside, but they definitely made it sound like it was really cold. That is one good thing about the movie, is that they definitely made that part of the movie really feel like that it's freezing.
Right. Well, of course it was snowing, but she also looked very cold. Her lips, absolutely. Everything about her. She looked like her lips in person.
Yeah, her lips were completely chapped and her skin was whiter than white.
Yeah, it feels grayish, weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Still being stuck in fear, she just looks at Chris and says, "We have to get out of here." And she starts crying. Chris is in denial. Again, good boyfriend. He's
assuming the same. He's kind of assuming, though, the same thing that you could easily assume is that we took some bad shit last night and you're just having hallucinations. So you could kind of see where that, like, looking at it, you could think the same thing, even with that creature too. that she keeps seeing.
Who says that they're okay and everything will be fine. There's always one of those bastards in these movies. Everybody else is like, no, we should go. And the other one's, no, it's fine. It's great. Everything's good. And I don't know who's worse, that guy or all the dumbasses that, yeah, you're right. It will be fine.
Hell, I'd want to get out of there just because there's no fucking power.
Right, exactly. You know, I want to charge my shit. I want to watch Tubi.
Yeah. I want to be warm.
Right. So Chris ends up looking to go turn on the electricity because he tried it again and nothing came up. Allie is still frozen in fear, but she's left alone in the house. She's left completely alone. She's just humming to herself. As a reminder, this is the love of his life. Chris ends up finding the fuse box, and the part that confused
that fuse box. I'm sorry. I'm assuming that fuse box is in the basement.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know what you're talking about. I think that cellar was separate from the basement. It could have been like a root cellar or something like that.
Right.
You actually had to go outside to it, whereas this basement, you were able to get into it from the inside. So they could have been two different areas, or it could have just been two separate rooms.
Maybe.
What confused me about that is it's a modern circuit breaker. You don't have to do like the old timey, change the screw and get the fuse out and then screw the new one back in. You don't have to do any of that. So he starts tracing the wires, like wherever they go. So I don't understand that, because these boxes, if the power's out, you just flip the one that's off.
Right. I didn't understand it either. I was like, what is he doing?
Right. They end up going back to Allie, and she's kind of creeping around because she's scared, and so she's kind of like walking slow around the house. Chris is still tracing the wire for an exceptionally long time. Again, just simply to reset the breaker. When they go back to Allie, and she's peeing with her arm up, checking to see if she's sure and all this stuff.
Not only did she smell her armpit, but she kind of like rubbed it. She was checking to see, did she shave that day?
Right.
I was like, what is this for?
You know, as we're talking about that though, it makes sense. We'll get to it, but it makes sense. So Chris finally flips the breaker on, and he realizes that it's not working. So he flips it on to no avail. Even though he took that much time to flip the breaker, he would have figured that out 15 minutes prior if he just flipped the breaker first. So Chris ends up looking for Allie. She's asking how long they've been there for. And Chris is asking why, and she points to the flowers that they were given like in the beginning, and they're wilting and they're dead, kind of falling over.
Right. And this is why she has hair in her armpit.
Right. So that's why she was checking.
Yeah.
See, that's what I mean. There's like weird continuity errors that you think are continuity errors, but then like when you really piece it together, it's like, oh, that actually makes sense. So like the first time,
I didn't catch that.
If you watch this once, you do have to watch it a second time because of these little nuances, because they're so easy to miss.
Yeah. Although that's a really actually, now that I realize that that's what that was for, that's actually a very clever little thing. I just thought it was, even the second time I watched, because the first time I was like, why is she sniffing her arms and touching it like that? And then the second time I still said it again. I'm like, what is she doing? Like, why is she doing this? I just thought it was just some weird little thing. But actually, now that you're bringing that up, and I'm like, oh, it actually is kind of a clever little way of doing that. I like that.
Then there's a random shot of the barn. It goes back to the house, and they're looking for a phone. He's looking for his watch, and she's like, why the hell are you looking for your watch? Let's find a phone. They're just kind of like looking around, and it's taking a while. So at this point, Allie just wants to leave. You know, she just doesn't care anymore. She just wants to go.
Right.
And Chris wants to just continue to look for the phone. Again, you know, hey, let's go to safety. No, let's stay and find our stuff. Personally, at this point, I wouldn't give a shit. It's like, yeah, let's go. I'm done.
Right. My car can tell me what time it is. I can turn on the radio in my car. I can drive the fuck home and find out what day it is.
Right. So Chris is fiddling with the radio, and Allie gets pissed. Like, why the hell are you doing that for? He ends up getting reception, and he's like, that's why. They're talking about some sort of news report. They both hear that it's April 6th. And Allie's like, we've been here for 4 days. That's leading you to believe that when they went to bed and they woke up, they were asleep for 4 days straight. So Chris still wants to look for the phones, even though Allie is adamant about leaving. I'm sorry, if this movie went any other way, which we'll get to, I would have left Chris's ass after this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because he's a disrespectful douchebag, doesn't really give a shit about her at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't even entertain the idea of leaving. It's just, no, we're still going to look for the phones.
Right.
She finally, says again she wants to leave, and Chris finally relents to the idea and says, okay, let's go. As they're leaving, Allie wants to call the police. Chris reminds that they don't have a charger, but then Chris realizes that he's got a battery backup charger in his backpack. And so at that point, they go back and look for the phones. Allie's not happy.
Because at least now, like before, they didn't realize they didn't have a car, so it didn't make sense not to leave. But now they know that they don't have a car. It's like, okay, well, all right, let's go back in and find our shit. But before that, I would have been like, just grab whatever you can and get the fuck out of here. Yeah.
So they're frantically looking for the phones. Chris looks in the downstairs living room, and Allie goes upstairs and sees a painting of Mother Mary on the wall. It doesn't have any mouth, so it's kind of creepy. And at first, that's what I thought she was seeing, is that it's kind of like a creepy painting. And as she gets closer to it, she realizes that there's a camera in one of the eyes. She yells for Chris to come upstairs, and he's mad at this point because he can't find the phones in the couch pillows, even though that's the only place he looked, because they ended the previous scene of him down there looking through the pillows, and they go back to him throwing the pillow down, being pissed off that he can't find the phone. Only place he looked was the couch. So
it was doing a very thorough job of it. Then maybe that's what it was.
Yes. So Allie screams for him to come upstairs. She points out the camera to Chris, and she thinks it's one of his pranks at first.
Right.
He adamantly states it's not him. He wouldn't do something like that, no matter what he's done. He ends up yelling for David, going downstairs, and he's yelling to David to come out, and is showing different angles of like these web cameras while he's doing this.
He's pissed. He's super pissed too.
Yeah. And Allie again sees a strange figure in the bedroom. Again, it's the skinless Allie. Kind of goes into like a first-person view, almost kind of like Evil Dead when that thing like comes up to him and possesses him. Like it's just kind of like that first-person shot, and the creature runs up to her and gets in her face and screams at her. It goes to the web camera where it just shows Allie there. Chris runs up in front of her, not seeing anything in front of her. And he ends up kind of like snapping her too.
Right. Well, I will say she is an excellent screamer.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
She did great in that screaming scene. She's a scream queen.
Chris shakes her, and I mean, with like everything this woman has, like for an actress, like you just said, she just screams, I just want the fuck out of here. She says it with such gusto that you fucking believe that she wants out of there.
Right. Yeah.
Do you want out of the house? Do you want out of the film? You know, do you want out of acting? Because like the way she said this thing, she wants fucking out.
Out.
And she's got this, like when she's in her state of mind of being scared, she has like this awful, the angriest, scariest look on her face. Yeah. It's the scariest thing of the whole damn movie.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. She makes her faces that, yeah.
And for me, even teasing about it though, it was amazing, you know, because you don't really see that level in many actresses.
Right. And especially like a film like this, which is basically an independent film, I would assume. It feels like it. I don't know who she is. I'd never seen her before. But yeah, I thought she was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do. I completely agree. And I did forget to take the note on how she was asking if Chris had his keys, and they go outside, and, you know, it didn't matter if he had his keys or not because the car's not there.
Yeah, but the funny thing is he did have the keys, but somehow the car was gone.
Right.
Which I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. Nobody does.
Yeah.
The next scene is Chris and Allie seemingly walking quite a distance away from the house. Chris is upset and yelling about the car, you know, which understandable. I probably would too. Allie at this point realizes and asks Chris, did you get the fertility meds? He's like, no. Did you? And she's like, no. So Chris is pissed, which is understandable because, I mean, I've been in those situations where you have to bring something important with you, and the other person's supposed to bring it with them, and they don't. And now you're stuck.
Right.
While they're on the road talking, they show crosshairs. I think it's on Chris first. And you see a bloody finger on the trigger. And so it goes back to Chris and Allie. Chris says that they're going back to go get the meds. Goddamn Chris needs to stay out of that fucking house because he's always wanting to go and stay.
When this scene came up, I was like, first of all, you shouldn't have brought the fucking medicine in the first place. There's no reason for it. But who gives a fuck about this medicine? Fuck that house. Go get a new prescription. Go tell them you lost it. Somebody stole it. whatever. Who
That is
fucking cares?
That is exactly my same thought. It's like, just fuck the meds. Let's just keep going. We'll figure something out later on down the road.
Right. It's
I
like it's
mean,
the only medicine left in the world.
if he makes that much money, then they could buy a new prescription.
Right.
So, of course, Chris is trying to convince Allie to go back to the house to get the meds. Obviously, Allie's concerned about the meds, but she's not that concerned. Like, she knows that. But Chris is still being the ever persistent individual, ignoring Allie's pleas. And they're still kind of being shown in the crosshairs, kind of like going between them. So, like, 1 minute it's on Chris, and the next it's on Allie. When Chris finally convinces her to go back, she just looks like a broken puppy at this point. She, like, her face just looks so defeated. Again, like, this woman's face acting alone is just amazing, because you could seriously tell how disappointed and how damaged she was from all of this. And it goes back to the finger trigger. The guy ends up taking his finger off of the trigger. So they get to live for a little bit. So they slowly walk back to the house. And again, Chris leaves Allie outside by herself.
Well, she said she couldn't go back in the house. She's like, I can't go in there. And he was like, okay, fine. You can just stay here and I'll go in and get the medication. So she chose to stay out there, I guess, to some extent.
Right. Again, though, for me, it kind of goes back to we shouldn't even be at the house. We should just keep walking.
Exactly. Like, no doubt. Absolutely. So agreement there. Yeah.
Chris finds an axe and he starts walking in very slowly, like something's going to attack him.
He grabbed a weapon. What was it? Did he grab a hatchet? An axe?
Yeah, it was like a hatchet. Yeah. It's a new thing. An axe or a hatchet. Yes.
Yeah.
And so Allie is shown in the security camera looking off in the distance, kind of like looking away from the house. And then it goes back to Chris as he's continuously walking through the house. Then a shot of Allie, back to Chris, back to Allie. She hears crows in the background. And that's kind of like how it was. It was just kind of like Chris, Allie, Chris, back and forth, Allie, Chris, Allie. And they weren't really doing a whole lot in between those shots at that point.
Chris was not progressing through the house. Like, if it were me and I had to go in this fucking house again and get whatever I had to get, I would just go in the fucking house and go right to where I needed to go, look for whatever, get it, and get the fuck out. But he was like holding the axe and he's like creeping in and looking around. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Just go get your shit, man.
And now keep in mind, nothing has happened to Chris. Nothing has happened to Chris for him to be walking this way, because he's always been the one, oh, we're fine, everything's great, we're good, you're just tripping. But now all of a sudden, he's like, oh, something's going to get me.
Right, which is weird too, because the last that we knew when he was in the house was that David was being a dick and was pranking them and filming them and stole their car. But nothing like he tried to attack you or any monsters. You couldn't see any monsters. None of that. So what the fuck is he doing?
Right, exactly. So he's still creeping around. He ends up opening a door and it goes back to Allie. But this time, a bloody hand comes from behind her, grabs her face, and she screams. Chris rips his head around and runs downstairs. Allie's being dragged by that creature again. And this is where I thought it was a different creature, because this is where it looked like there was a lot of skin on it this time. Whereas every other time, it looked like there was no skin on it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I don't want to give too much away yet.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to later.
So Chris stops at the window on the stairs and he sees Allie being dragged by her leg, but there's nothing there that he can see that's dragging her. She just sees her leg up in the air and she's being dragged across the ground. Allie is dragged down to the cellar stairs, and Chris ends up going outside and runs around to those same stairs, and he had to axe his way in because the door was closed and locked, and so he was like breaking into the door. So again, Chris is slowly moving in and he hears like some electricity noises. He finds Allie looking at a monitor. The original shot, it looks like that it's their bedroom. But then that's when Chris sees a generator powering everything. They both realize that they've been recorded the entire time that they've been there, including them having sex, the interactions with David, dinner, like pretty much everything that they did over the weekend. It was filmed. And Chris ends up like clicking out of the video camera and he sees a site called Sinner's Red Room, which he realizes that it's a dark web scenario. So someone is recording them for the dark web. He sees a video and he presses play. It kind of has like old-timey title cards,
Yeah.
like 1920s silent film kind
Right.
of stuff. It's like Weekend at David's, and then it shows them coming into the house and greeting David. And it just shows different clips like that with different quotes or scenarios,
Right.
kind of like narrating their day or their time there. They end up seeing a video of the wood mask guy going into their bedroom and doping them up with some substance that knocked them out for 4 days. And he starts like messing with them, like making them talk like with his finger and like moving their mouth.
Do you think, because he's talking to them while this is going on, they're unconscious, when he goes over to her and he says something, I can't remember exactly, but something about, see, you want to have a baby or something like that. And at that point, because of course, Christopher and Allie are watching it, and Allie's like, oh my God. And then Christopher's like, don't look, don't look, don't look, and makes her turn around. Do you think that he did something to her, assaulted her, raped her?
I didn't think about that, but that's very possible.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because he was like, don't look, turn around. I was
There,
like,
there definitely was an illusion there. I missed it
Yeah.
because I just thought that he was just saying, don't look because he's messing with you. But I didn't think about it like in that sense, but it's very possible.
Yeah, they didn't really go more into it at all, but because the first time I watched it, I didn't think about it, but the second time I watched it, I caught that he said this thing about, oh, so you want to have a baby, but he said it in a certain way. And then when I realized that Christopher's like, don't look, and she's all like freaking out, I thought, oh, maybe he was doing something. So,
Right.
but I wasn't really sure.
Yeah, no, that definitely fits and makes sense. So at this point, the killer is kind of coming downstairs, and at that point, they also find David. He's alive, but he's a little beat
You got it
up.
backwards, by the way.
Do I?
Jesse's the one they find. David was the one at the beginning of the show that was running through the field.
That's what I thought too, but when I watched it the second time through, it ended up being Jesse. That was the one in the field.
Jesse's the one that's down in the basement. Jesse's the guy they met at the infertility class. The fertility class.
Oh, no, you're right.
So Jesse was still alive in the basement, and David was the one at the beginning of the movie that was running through the field.
So she walks away, and Chris ends up finding another video. That's where it kind of shows Jesse and David together. Was he just stalking them at that point, or did he do something to them?
Christopher, to David and Jesse?
To David, David and Jesse, or was it just their picture?
Yeah. No, basically, you click on the video of David and Jesse, and you see that he is not actually David, that David is somebody else. David, the real David, Jesse's fiance, you see where he's the one that was running through the fields at the beginning, and he's doing all this stuff to them. But then you hear her yelling for Christopher, so he gets pulled away from the computer because she's wandered off through the basement.
And he goes over and he sees that Jesse is alive in the basement. He's not doing too good, but he's alive.
Right.
And so while they're trying to save Jesse, the killer ends up coming downstairs. The killer starts talking to them with a very bad Heath Ledger Joker voice. So that's how I took it. Because he's kind of like, you're not supposed to be down here yet. I would like to say that he was influenced by Heath Ledger's Joker, but he didn't do a good job with it. You should have used a totally different voice.
Right. I was a little uncertain with this character being this way because when you have a masked character that's supposed to be a scary character like Jason or something like that, or Michael Myers. They typically don't speak. You don't hear them say anything, and it kind of adds to that mystery, and it makes them even creepier.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when he started talking, I was kind of torn because I thought he was kind of funny because I liked that guy anyway before. I thought he was funny. But in here, when he's talking and he's being funny, I was like, I kind of liked it. I kind of liked the humor he had, especially a little later on. But I was also like, oh, they're making him talk. Because there's a difference, say Freddy Krueger. Now, Freddy Krueger isn't wearing a mask. He is burnt up in a mess. So that's why he looks that way. And him talking doesn't bother me. And he's, funny too, and he has his way of being. But you have those that wear masks. They wear masks because we're supposed to know who they are. When you have them like that where they're masked, they typically don't have a whole lot of personality because they are just almost like drones walking around doing whatever. So when he started speaking, and I was like, ugh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. But at the same time, he was also kind of funny. I don't know. I was up in the air about how I felt about how they did that with the character. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, in movies like that, atmosphere and how they use the character is very important to their mystique. Because you look at the very first Nightmare on Elm Street, you barely saw Freddy Krueger. And if you did, he was
Right.
usually in shadow, or he's on the phone, or he's coming out of the wall. You don't really
Right.
see him 100% until more towards the end of the movie, which kind of gave him more of a creep factor.
Right.
Same thing with Jaws. Like, the only thing that really made
Oh,
Jaws
yeah.
scary was the fact that you barely saw you only saw the shark's fin until the very end. And the music and the people's reactions are what made that movie scary more than the shark itself.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it's how they use the character. And this one, I agree. Like, some of the stuff that he did in the earlier parts, kind of funny, but when he pulled out that Joker voice, I'm just like, no. No, we're done with him. So they're taunting Jesse, Allie, and Chris. I'm just kind of like making fun of them. And he goes over to the computer and he's looking at the chat, trying to figure out what he's going to do with them. And he's making fun, thinking, oh, these people are sick. Oh my God, like, look at these people. And it's kind of a throwback to what Chris had said at dinner time, that people want to see tragic situations. They want to see the accidents. They want to see people being traumatized. They want to see people being hurt. This whole dark web scenario is exemplifying that 100%, that it could be on YouTube or it could be on the dark net, but people want to see this stuff. I do kind of believe that as well, because we wouldn't have all the stuff that we do. The killer ends up telling Allie to stand and to dance.
This went way too long.
Yeah, it definitely went on for too long. But so she ends up dancing and she's crying at the same time, because obviously she's fearing for her life. Like Talon said, that it went on entirely too long. I even wrote that on my notes. It goes on for some time. So the killer is like, oh, we got a new star with Allie, and he ends up shooting Jesse, stabs Chris. Chris falls to his knees, and then he takes what looked like, to me, I don't know exactly what it was, but it looked like it was like a sharpened tire iron or something, and it goes through.
It was definitely a tire iron,
and he jammed it through the top of his skull, and it comes down like through his mouth and down through his chin. Allie ends up screaming, but it's almost like a supernatural sort of scream. It sounded like they had like an added effect to the scream.
Well, you also had the creepy monster showed up and screamed, because when Jesse was shot and killed, the creepy monster came out and screamed really loud over top of Jesse.
Okay. I missed that part. And so Allie ends up running with a very scary, angry face look, and she's running down the road. As she's running, you get some like old time music that was playing that the killer ended up putting on.
Oh, yeah.
And as she's running, it goes to the lyric of "Taking My Love From Me," and it goes over to Chris laying there on the ground with the tire iron through his head. And it cuts back to Allie, and now we're back to regular scary music. She starts running towards the barn. And I don't understand this. She hides behind a fence that you can completely see her. Like, the only thing that's hidden is her head and like the very core of her body. You can see all her legs, and you can see her arms, you can see her back, you can see her chest, you can see her stomach. With that, the killer ends up shooting her in the arm. Surprise, surprise. You can't see me. Yes, I can. So she ends up running into the barn to find a place to hide. As she's running around, she ends up running out the door on the other side.
On the back of the barn. Yeah.
Yeah, on the back of the barn. Killer still pursuing her, ends up in the barn himself. He's looking through the barn. And at first, this part confused me, but then I understood it. She's hiding in the barn.
Right.
After it shows her leaving the barn, she's actually back in the barn. Now, you didn't see her coming in the barn, so that's why it kind of confused me. It was just like one of those unseen, behind the scenes sort of plans that she had.
It's like, okay, so when she's originally running down the road from the house, you see a shot where it looks like she's looking over at the barn. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Is she gonna go hide in this damn barn? Because that always pisses me. Like, why? Like, I'm sure I will say this a million times in all these horror movies. Why are you going inside something and hiding and getting stuck there? So I'm pissed that she's running towards this barn. I'm like, great, she's gonna go hide in the fucking barn. And then you see her go out of the barn. Now, of course, she's been shot before she goes in the barn. She goes in and then runs out the back. And then you see him come in. He's looking around. Then all of a sudden you see her. She's hiding on the other side, I think of the truck or something. But he walked over to the door, the back door, and he sees the blood trail she left. And I was like, oh. And so this is probably the only time, the first and only time, I'll be like, oh, she had a good idea.
Right.
She ran. It's like when you do the footprints in the snow or on the mud and you walk back in your footprints
Right.
so
You
that they
try to
look like
cover it.
you're going whatever. And
Yep.
so she made him think that she was outside. And I was like, oh, well, at least she had a good plan. Thank God. Smart move.
Okay, so with that, he sees the blood trail and he thinks that, hey, I got something going on here. He opens up the other barn door that was beside the one he just opened because his ATV was right there. He
Right.
mounts the camera that he had on his gun. He mounted it onto the ATV and he turns the ATV on. And all of a sudden, and he's looking out, and then she comes up behind him and just like stabs him right through the head with a pitchfork. Now it doesn't go completely through his head, but it does go through his neck that you see a little bit later. He ends up dropping to the ground. She ends up jumping on the ATV and takes off. And she's just driving miraculously with a pitchfork through his head and his throat. He's crawling towards the wall, gasping for air and calling her a bitch.
And he takes his mask off. When he took his mask off, I thought, well, first of all, he shaved.
Yes.
And because it's David that we knew from when they first got to the house. I was like, oh, he looks like Jimmy Kimmel with no facial hair. That's what I thought. I was like, oh, it's like Jimmy Kimmel. Hey, go ahead. Okay.
Have you ever seen the movie Kick-Ass?
No.
No, because I forget the actor's name.
I mean, I know what it is, but
one of the actors in there reminded me more of him. But I could see the Jimmy Kimmel thing. So it goes back to Allie, and she's still driving. It goes back to the killer, and he's like screaming, "Ow, ow!" And in fairness, like with him screaming in pain and whatever, he was pretty convincing that with the pain that he was in. So I mean,
they did a good job with that.
There was definitely some decent acting in it. I mean, it wasn't great 100% of the time, but there was some parts where it's like you really felt like you were there because of how they were.
Right. And even all like the stuff coming out, like he didn't even really have a lot of blood coming out of his mouth, but he had a lot of just foam and saliva and just whatever coming out of his mouth.
Just gunk. And so then now they do an overhead shot of Allie still driving.
Screaming, right?
Yes.
I feel like she was doing her good scream again.
They go back to the killer and he ends up standing up saying that he was going to get her. And again, goes back to Allie, continuing to drive. And at this point, she should be well far away from the scenario. Like she should be like gone.
Yeah, because he's like spending a good amount of time trying to get that pitchfork out of his throat.
Right. And that's the thing. Like while he's standing up, he ends up seeing a nail, just a singular nail angled on the wall. And he's trying desperately to get the handle onto the nail. And he does. And with this one singular nail, he was able to pull the pitchfork out of his head without, I mean, of course he can't use his hands, but without using anything else but this nail. And he's successfully able to get this thing out of his head. And he's like, ow, screams in pain, but yet he's still able to stand. And we go back to Allie.
This part was completely unbelievable. There's no way. There's just no way. He would have pulled the nail out of the wall, I feel, before he could have pulled that pitchfork out of his neck.
Or at least bent it. I think it either would have either fallen out or it would have bent. It wouldn't have done that at all.
Right.
But we go back to Allie and continuing to drive. And much like the last movie when there was a guy like running around and it looked like he was running in circles,
right?
But trying to make it look like he was running far away. That's what it felt like with this, is that she was just driving around the field, around in circles to make it look like that she's driving distance, but she's not getting anywhere.
Right.
The killer ends up feeling better because he's able to get up and aim his rifle, reload it as if nothing happened. He puts the scope on Allie and shoots her in the side off of the ATV. The film goes back to him and he's laughing like the Joker. At least that was my interpretation
super happy
of that.
With himself.
Yes, he's ecstatic. He looked like how my dog did when she caught her first squirrel. She was very proud of herself. So he ends up walking over to Allie, who apparently is not that far away.
Right. It took him no time to walk there.
Right. Yeah. And he's like kind of like walking like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Because at this point,
Yeah.
he's starting to feel it, I guess.
Right.
He's okay to shoot a gun, but he can't walk straight.
Well, adrenaline.
True. So he walks past the ATV, checking his camera, making sure it's, functioning, and he ends up putting his mask back on. He starts recording his outro for the video that he just recorded. He's talking about how everybody loves twisty endings and the such. Allie ends up ambushing him in the back, assumingly with a belt, and drops him to the ground, drags him a little bit of a distance, and chokes him out until he's dead.
I would say that was one of the most realistic choking scenes I've ever seen in a movie or a TV show. Choking someone takes a really long time.
It does.
It's a lot longer than they show in most TV shows and movies. And because of that, I think that's why they make it seem so short, because they can't sit there for that long to choke someone out on a TV show or in a movie. But it was a long time. I mean, it wasn't as long as it probably would be in real life, but it was longer than you would see in most TV shows and movies. I was surprised that they let it go that long.
So it seems like a weekly disclaimer. We have not, and nor will we ever do this to anybody. So we do not have firsthand knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know why it takes such a long time to choke someone out. Yeah.
No, this is where we say we've never done it ourselves.
No, we've never done it ourselves. I'm trying to sound convincing.
So he's down on the ground, he's dead, and she adds a couple stomps to his head. And this is all shot like at a distance, but she stomps on his head for good measure. She falls to her knees and then falls over. At this point, assumingly she's dead. So everybody in the place is dead now.
Right.
And so now we have a flashback to when Chris and Allie are meeting Jesse for the first time at the fertility clinic. They're going back and talking about, introducing, and basically that whole conversation starts taking place again.
Right.
But now the camera starts going behind Chris, and they're going to the back row of the seats that were of the waiting room. It shows David sitting there with a cap on, reading a magazine, but with his phone recording Chris, Allie, and Jesse. And that is where the movie ends. Well, he smiles first, and then the movie ends.
Honestly, they didn't need that part. I know they were probably like, oh, this is why this is happening. But honestly, I felt that part was completely unnecessary. He could have just been a crazy guy that happened to be in that area and went to that house and killed David, the real David, and Jesse or whatever. It's like, why? Why was he in the fertility clinic? Was he already following them around? Like, what was he stalking them before this? Completely unnecessary scene.
Right. No, I completely agree.
So what was the thing that I thought you and I might both be thinking of when you were talking about in the beginning of this?
So when we were talking about this, we're talking about her medium family. At first, I felt like that the ghosts were out of place and talking about the medium was out of place because it didn't really feel like that it fit. It just felt very random. Just, let's just throw it in. But I think what was actually going on was the humanoid, the creature, whatever, was trying to warn her.
Right. So in the first watching of it, I thought the same thing. I'm like, why did we need to know that she could see dead people? Why do we need to know this, that she came from a family of mediums? Again, her seeing that creature could have been the hallucinations, but you also know that she's got this medium gene and she can see dead people. But what's the point? What's the point of this creature, right? The second time I watched it, I was like, oh, that's David. So in the movie...
As the creature?
Yeah, I guarantee you that's David. And I don't know for a fact, just like I don't know how long it takes to choke anybody. But I didn't first realize it was David. But that scene where she's levitating and then you see her go to the basement and then it's down in the basement and looks around the corner or whatever, up at her, up the steps. I was like, it's trying to get her to go in the basement, which of course now I know what's in the basement. So the second time I watch it, I put it together and I'm like, oh, maybe it's trying to help her. Like, hey, look what's going on in the basement because you want to get the fuck out of here.
Right.
But then as I continued to watch it, and then there's the part where when they were in the basement and they were watching the videos, you could see in the videos where after... Because David at the beginning was the guy in the beginning of the movie that was running through the field that he shot and killed. And then you could see where he wrapped him up in some shit and then took him and put him in the fire pit and burnt him. So that creature was just a burnt David. Like that's why its skin was like that and all funky and the whole thing. It's because he was all burnt up. So then you have where he obviously is growing impatient and grabs her when she's outside and takes her down into the basement. Because you notice it takes her down in the basement. And then the next scene, when Chris goes down there, there's no creature. She's just standing there looking at the computer. It's like, well, what the fuck happened to the creature, right? So then when she walks over to where she ends up finding Jesse, you can barely see it, but you can see the creature standing back against the wall, all hunched down by Jesse, but a little further away. And then when Jesse gets shot, that creature comes over top of Jesse and screams bloody murder. And I'm like, oh, that's gotta be David. And she can see him because she sees dead people, and David is dead, obviously,
Right.
and he knows what's going on. So he is trying to get her to go down the basement, probably to find Jesse, because he wants to save Jesse.
Right.
And then, of course, Jesse ends up getting killed. So it wasn't until the second go round that I was like, oh, and it wasn't until near the end that I realized, oh, that's David. It's got to be David. Can't imagine it would be anybody else.
So
that's why it looks so burnt and fucked up.
So like the ghost is David.
Yeah. That whole creature thingy was David. Yeah.
So I think we were kind of like both on the same track. I just didn't think of it as David. But
yeah.
I definitely got the idea that even though it was a scary creature, it was trying to help her. It was trying to, like you said, look at this, go down here. And she didn't. So the next time we're going to drag your ass down there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize, like in the beginning, when I finally realized that it, like you did, that it was helping them, I didn't realize it was David until I saw the video of the fake David, the bad guy, throwing him on the fire pit, which remember she was out to the fire pit and was standing there naked in that one scene out by the fire pit.
But so that's what I mean about this movie is like, if you watch it one time and you miss certain aspects, you're going to think that these are plot holes. You're going to think that these are continuity errors. You're going to think, well, that's awkwardly put in there. Why did they do that? And when I watched it more closely while taking notes, it all started to click. It's like, oh, that's why that's there. That makes more sense. So this is definitely a two-watcher sort of.
Definitely. And I'm always like, and I think I've told you this about me before, but I am the type of person, especially when it comes to horror movies or any kind of suspense thriller or psychological thriller, I have so much anticipation for the end of the movie that I watch the movie, but I'm so anxious to find out how it ends that I feel like I miss a lot of that intricate stuff. I have to go watch it a second time because now that I know the end and what I'm looking for, and when I watch it the second time, I can catch those other things. I do it all the time. But yeah, this was definitely one of those movies. And it's funny because the first time I watched it, I was like, I don't know how much I like this movie.
Same.
But then the second time I watched it, and now that I know about the armpit hair, I'm super impressed by the like, because they did, I mean, honestly, when I first watched it, I was like, okay, they really could have done some other stuff with this. And it was a movie that for a while, I wasn't sure which way it was going to go. Because at one point it felt like Christopher is maybe pulling this prank, or maybe all of a sudden his friend Jesse shows up at the fertility clinic. So he and Jesse are doing a prank together.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too.
Yeah. Or Jesse and his fiance decided that they're going to prank him. And that all in all, once it all ended up, it was just a big prank. And that was that, kind of sort of thing. Or a prank that goes really bad and maybe something ends up getting killed, even though it was a prank. So I was never sure which way it was going to go. Of course, when they go down and they see all the videos, and I'm like, okay, obviously this guy's a cuckoo nut banana and he's the bad guy and he's not the real David. It felt flat, like there was something that was missing. But now with the second run through and the armpit hair.
You love that armpit hair.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I feel like I appreciate it a little more because it could have been full of plot holes if you weren't paying attention. But then when you put it all together and you figure out those plot holes that aren't really plot holes, you're like, oh, well, they did a really good job. I feel like they did a good job putting it together. Yeah. I mean, there were some parts that you're just like, okay, we don't need this, or this was too long. But especially now that we've talked about it too, I'm like, I think I like this movie more than I thought I did.
Yeah, same. If we would have rated it on my first watch, I probably would have given it 3 cents. But after watching it again, I'd probably give it a 5. It wasn't without its faults, but going through a second time and watching and picking up like all those little nuances, it definitely raises it up for me. And
Yeah.
the thing with that too is like I see a lot of movies on IMDb that are rated like 5.5 or 5, and I end up liking them. Like,
right.
So for me, an IMDb 5 is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Oh, yeah. 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 I would. So you're going with 5 cents?
Yes.
Yeah. I might actually, because I am, and I think it's just my current reaction right now, maybe, because I'm so the army. I'm just so impressed that they thought to put that in there. Because
right?
the first time I'm watching it, I'm like, why is she doing this? Why is she sniffing her armpit and rubbing her armpit hair? It just did not dawn on me. And I will say, not that I'm easy to impress, but there are a few things that do impress me in a movie. And one is if there's a twist and I don't get it, especially because a lot of times I'll get the twist in like first 10, 15 minutes of the movie. I'm like, oh, I know what's going to happen. Like in The Sixth Sense, I knew he was dead. In the other, and was it The Others with Nicole Kidman? I was like, oh, she's a ghost. And her ghosts are real life people. I mean, like, you can figure them out. Like, you watch enough horror movies, you figure them out. But like, Saw, I had no fucking clue.
Oh, that first one was amazing.
Yeah. I was jumped off the couch. Because I watched it at home. I was like, holy shit. I had no fucking idea that was him. I was so impressed by when they can get me, or even if it's just a jump scare. Like we were talking last week, where I was talking about how that movie got me with some jump scares because of the timing of the jump scare. Anything like that, I'm like, that's fucking cool. Like, the fact that they thought about the armpit hair and put it in there to show passage of time, and I didn't get it. I'm like, I'm so impressed by that. Get this girl a Harry's razor. Okay.
Right. There you go. There you go.
So what were you going to say about, because I kept cutting you up. I was talking about being impressed.
Yeah. I'm kind of like the same way. It's hard to impress me in horror movies, but I absolutely love it when something does come up, because going back to Saw, my mouth just dropped. I'm just like,
yeah,
the dead guy's the killer? How is it the dead guy? My mind was like blown, because at the time there was nothing like that. I mean, yeah, the premise, torture movie, whatever, but the premise of it being the guy in the middle of the floor when you think he's been dead the whole time, like,
right,
that was never been done, or at least not in that way, and I was just like thoroughly impressed with it. But yeah, I mean, it takes a lot to impress me, but when it does, it's just like, oh my god. Right.
So I think I'm just floating in the
armpit hair
joy of so I'm gonna probably give it a 6 to 6.5 cents, somewhere in there.
That's fair.
And mainly because there were some things, like I didn't like the ending, like that extra ending where they went back and showed I was like, that's totally unnecessary. There were the parts that kind of went on for a while, little things here and there. But now that, I really think about it, the writing, I guess, and that woman's acting are pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
She was great. I'm now impressed with the writing that they thought to put all that shit in there. And so yeah, I'd give it like at least a 6.5 cents, somewhere there.
Yeah, and overall the acting really wasn't that bad.
No. Even
it really wasn't.
David guy. Yeah. All right. So do you have any other thoughts or anything about the movie?
No, I think we can put a sock on it.
Okay. I think that's better than those pigs have been slopped. You can put a sock on it. All right, then. And that wraps up this week's episode of 2 Cents We See Scary Movies podcast. Thanks for hanging out while I gave my completely unsolicited opinions, and an extra thanks to Dan for leading us through this chaotic prank-filled nightmare. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or just casually shout out our podcast name as strangers. It all helps. Next week, we're kicking off a brand new theme, and this time we're heading to the lake. That's right, all month long we'll be covering horror movies that take place on, in, or around lakes, and I get to pick the first one. We'll be watching Lake Mungo, a documentary-style psychological horror film that you can find on Amazon Prime, Shudder, Tubi, and plenty of other places. So if you haven't seen it, now's the perfect time to check it out before next week's episode. Until then, stay scared, be prepared, And don't get caught in the dark.